All right, everybody, so we've made it to the final installment of our flower painting with our cute little bumblebee. We are going to be doing the final few steps in this. We're still using the same paint palette as last time when we worked on our leaves and foliage, and now we're going to stick again with those 3 round paintbrushes. So the smallest, the medium, and the intermediate round. So I'm going to use my intermediate round for the most part for this part, and then the other 2 will come in at the end. So right now what we have to do is we have to make purple. And in making this purple, I'm going to use 2 parts of red and 1 part of blue. Purple, when you are making it using primary colors, doesn't always come out the way you want. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, the key typically is don't use too much blue and use white. So I will add the white in just a minute, but I want to get that base mix going through. I'm using my palette knife again here. I can actually see that I already have too much blue in here. So I'm pulling some from my reserve piles. That's what those are there for. And really what you're doing is you're changing the amount of how deep or how blue the purple actually is. So I can kind of see what that's looking like over here, but I still must add white. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of that white that I have in my reserve piles, and I'm going to mix it in. So when we're doing this, we want to have 3 different versions of our purple. So we'll have a dark, a medium, and a light. So right now, this is kind of my dark version. I only need a little bit of my dark, so I'm going to kind of just scoot this over and make my medium. I'm going to add a little bit more to my reserve white. I'm going to pull from that. So making my medium. And I'm again using the whole thing. And remember, when you are mixing paint, you're not trying to paint your paper plate or your paper that you're using to mix. You're just trying to keep the paint in one contained area, and you're trying to mix it together. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be mixed, at least to some degree that you can tell that they're different colors. All right, and so I have that medium tone, and then I'm going on to my lightest. I actually want more to be left in that medium tone. That'll be the primary one we use. And then again, pulling from my reserve white. And as I add more paint to this, it'll become, obviously, a larger pile of paint because you're adding more paint to it. And that yellow just came through from when I accidentally put my hand in the yellow pile during the last video. Okay, I'll try to cover that up so it gets less confusing. All right, so we have my 3 grades, my dark, medium, and light. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off my paint palette knife. Oops. Before moving on, making sure we keep our supplies clean. They're there for us when we need them later on. And then we're ready to get started painting. So in order to do these, we are going to be painting basically pointy oval or football shapes. Remember, hydrate your paintbrushes before you use them, but this is just a continuation of the last video. So mine are already wet and ready to go. So we talked about how these stems are overlapping. So this one is the farthest one, second farthest, and then the closest. So if I need to have these actual flowers overlap in any way, I need to be aware of that. So I think we're pretty set, but in the case of your painting, they might actually overlap. So I'm using that medium tone of purple, and I'm making kind of a teardrop shape or pointy oval. I do want it to be slightly larger at the bottom, not tremendously, and yes, I am painting over part of my stem. That is definitely to be expected as part of this. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for each one of these. Think about size. Which one do you want to be? Smaller, bigger, that sort of a thing. They can be at different stages. We did talk about how typically the smallest one is farther away. But in this case, since it's your primary flower that you're working with, it doesn't necessarily have to follow those same constraints. Okay, let's make our last shapes. Now, We are going to be doing some fun stippling techniques or some dabbing techniques in this. That's where you're kind of pressing down your paintbrush and then lifting up in order to create that kind of fluffy texture that you see in the final product. So just kind of painting in. There we go, we have kind of the start. Okay, and now we get to start having some fun with this. Okay, so picking up that medium paint, we're going to press down and lift up, and we're going to do that all over. So we're kind of pressing down our paintbrush and lifting up, pressing down the whole thing and lifting up. And again, I'm just using that same medium, and I want to make sure that I'm going all the way out to the edges. I don't want those hard straight lines that I just painted, because I want them to feel soft and organic like flowers. And I'm going to do that to each one of these. Stippling around the edges, thinking about how the plant actually grows when I stipple this. So tighter together in the top, looser at the bottom. And again, if you're using a canvas and it's not attached to the table, go ahead and spin your picture in order to make it easier for you to paint. Okay. I really want the roundness of each of those shapes. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my darker. I'm not even going to worry about washing off my paintbrush. And I'm going to just put some areas of darker. I don't really want to go any farther than about halfway up my flower by putting that darker color, because those really should be for your highlights. And you can even go one step further and add a little bit more blue to the color that you've created in order to create even more of a darkness. And that would again be even in less places. And that darker value purple we made. Don't be afraid to go close to the edges. Using that darker blue. Okay, so pretty pleased with that. Gonna wash out our paintbrush and move on to the lighter ones. Okay, so going into our lighter paint pile, do some stippling as well. Now in the final example, you'll see that there are some petals that are kind of drifting off of the actual flower itself. You can definitely do that. It can be on purpose. It can be a happy accident, you know, if you accidentally missed. I'm going to do a few on purpose, so it kind of looks like they've been caught in the wind. And I'm going to go ahead and do this on each one of our flowers. Again, thinking about how it actually grows, and I can put some highlights over those darker areas, but again, you really want to be respectful of what's supposed to be the darker area and what's supposed to be the highlight. So they'll overlap just a little bit, but not by a ton. Again, I'm just going to put a few falling petals, a few kind of rogue dabs, and then in my reserve white, I'm just going to grab some of that and do a few, and I really mean a few highlights of just pure white mixed with whatever residual paint you have on your paintbrush. And if you want to do a few of these falling as well, they'll really stand out amongst that background. Alright, so once you get to this point, it is just finishing up however much or as little as you want to add to your picture. You can add more fluffiness to your leaves, to your plants, whatever you'd like to do, you can go from there. But the last thing is going to be adding your details to your bee. So this is where I'm bringing out black. I'm just using some straight up black for our bumblebee. Using my detail paintbrush, getting it wet, making sure it's ready to go. And I really want to thin out my black. And I'm going to go ahead and paint over that Hershey Kiss shape that we made for our bumblebee. I'm going to add a few whiskers, or antennae, I guess. Your cat mom over here calling things whiskers when they're antennae. Then I'm going to add a little bit of that on that black, using kind of almost like a grass texture overlapping to add kind of that stripe. I'm going to add a stripe as well, doing that kind of pulling grass-like texture on his bottom. I can also try and make him fuzzy, so have some of those lines kind of stick off the honeybee's body. I'm going to make those hatches and cross hatches kind of going in two different directions. Kind of fill it in. Again, whenever you're finished with it, whenever you're happy with the product, just stop there. I'm going to add two little legs in the front. The one that's farther away should technically be smaller if you can make it happen. I understand if you can't. Then there's another set, small ones, in that second section of the body. And then there's one larger pair of hind legs that they have. Kind of looks like a rectangle and a little foot coming off. So if you'd like to go back and add some highlights to this, some shadows, you can definitely do that with your detail brush. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight on the head of the bee just by putting a little dot kind of to represent that highlight. Add a little bit of highlight to the back of the bee and to the legs. So that's why I have my very fine detailed paintbrush out. And then if you want to define the wings anymore, you can kind of define them with a little light highlight. All right, everybody, we got the sun coming out, shine some light on our flower scene. But I hope you learned a lot, and if you have any questions, leave me a comment, and I will be more than happy to answer it.